Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, here to review the new Chip Tanaka album, Django. Chip Tanaka is the pseudonym of one Tanaka Hirokazu, who is known most for his work on soundtracks in old NES games, including the original Metroid, Kid Icarus, Super Mario Land, and the Mother or Earthbound series. But he's now breaking into the world of solo musicianship with this, his first solo album. According to the insert on this album, which I assume is a reputable source, much of this is music that he has accumulated over the years of doing live shows that he started around 2007. As a result, the track listing is a bit eclectic on here. There's a lot of different styles, but it all manages to come into a pretty cohesive product with his use of chiptune sounds that you might associate with his old video game soundtracks, combined with more modern EDM sounds. This thing kicks off with the track Ringing Dub, which is a kind of slow building, somewhat atmospheric track that I find somewhat underwhelming, as it doesn't really have a huge amount of direction to it, but does a fairly decent job of setting up the mood of the album and the kind of sound palette that Chip Tanaka will be working with from here on out. However, after the somewhat middling opening track, the album takes a upturn with two very solid tracks right off the bat. The very fun and upbeat Beaver has a kind of cute, almost vocal-like lead synth that plays a lot of really catchy melodies, just kind of meandering over the beat. The chords are very bouncy and staccato, and the song is very lighthearted and fun. And it's followed up by the title track, Django, which is a much softer, smoother track that features some very clean synth tones, playing some kind of jazzy harmony over top of a kind of unquantized, somewhat wonky J Dilla-esque beat that I find really compelling. We do get another kind of middling atmospheric track with the song EMGR, and there are a couple of these on the track listing, including the opener, and also the song Pop Bomb, which occurs much later in the album, that features a brief cameo from the song Popcorn by Hot Butter, that he doesn't really do anything with, and it doesn't seem to have a huge amount of direction behind it. And these tracks are really the only kind of downers on this track listing, because everything else on this 13-track album is pretty solid. Chip Tanaka proves that he can handle much more chaotic and experimental sounds on this album just as well as he can handle the more poppy side with tracks like Pulse Ride and Hungry, which are very chaotic and dense and somewhat dissonant, especially on the track Hungry, but are still compelling the whole way through. They cycle in a lot of different sounds. The songs are constantly evolving, and I think songs like these are where Chip Tanaka is really at his strongest, when he's kind of pushing a song forward, just seeing where it goes. It doesn't really have a verse-chorus structure. It is just kind of constantly introducing new parts, new sections. It's constantly changing and evolving, introducing new sounds, and when he pulls these off, they're almost universally compelling. There are some tracks on here that, of course, call back to his days as a video game composer. The track Prism especially sounds something straight out of an old NES or SNES game, but updated with a kind of chill house beat, some jazzy harmony again that he experiments with, and a throbbing synth bass. Chip Tanaka is calling back constantly to old video game music and his roots as a composer, but this is still a very modern album. It incorporates a lot of very modern sounds. There's even a bit of a kind of juke reference in the beat on Pulse Ride. And the only kind of non-atmospheric track that I find to be a little underwhelming is probably track 10, Rad Moose, which just kind of sounds a little bit dated with its dirty dubstep wobbling bass. I like the very upbeat and happy plinky melody that goes over top of this that provides a very nice juxtaposition, and the beat and the kind of wash of synth chords on this track are nice. But it just doesn't sound quite as cutting edge and up to date as a lot of the other material on this album. My favorite track on here is probably the song Aurora Swing, which is the second to last track. The first half of the song features a relatively simple looping chord progression and a lead synthesizer that's very clear and high-pitched and really cuts through the rest of the mix, and is harmonized by this somewhat understated bass line that is not quite doubling, but is playing alongside the melody. And this melody at the very beginning is winding and unpredictable and jazzy, and it is constantly kind of going in and out of being quantized and sounds a little bit dissonant, but always resolves back into something a bit more pleasing to the ear. And I find it really compelling, especially when it's harmonized with that bass line. The melody kind of devolves into some very short staccato beeps and boops as the song shifts into the second and much larger section, where this one big droning chord kind of evolves for several minutes as the accompanying percussion and backing synthesizers kind of orbit around it. The chord is almost a drone, but it's constantly evolving and changing, and it's, I guess, has a chord progression, but the way the voice leading between all the different notes on the chords like lead into each other, it makes it feel just like one big meandering mass. This is another one of the songs on here that doesn't really have any verse-chorus structure and is just kind of constantly evolving, and it's always a surprise to see where Chip Tanaka takes these songs, this song especially. And I think the droniness of the ending of this song sets up the last song, Obrigado Dub, pretty well. Obrigado Dub is a very soft, atmospheric beat track that is probably my favorite of these softer, more ambient songs. It has what feels like some vinyl noise or maybe tape hiss kind of going on in the background with some very soft synth chords happening and a very minimalist, chill, but tight beat. The song comes off almost like a really turned down juke track with its kind of glitchy percussion and cut up vocal sample that appears a few times on here. And I think it's actually a pretty solid closer to the album. So overall, I am enjoying this album. I'm not really blown away by it, aside from Aurora Swing, which I think is a really great track. But all the tracks on here are pretty solid. And while I'm not super into the ambient stuff, it's not like bad ambient music. It definitely has a structure to it and a kind of rising and fall dynamic, but it's just not really to my taste. But the more upbeat stuff on here I think is really solid, and I'm feeling probably a 7 out of 10 on this album. This album both makes for great kind of chill out music and is also pretty dance floor ready with a lot of the tracks on here. And I think there's an eclectic enough array of songs on here to really have something for anyone who's looking for EDM or some just generally interesting electronic music. So yeah, that's me. This is the new Chip Tanaka album. It's called Django. And I will not probably see you guys next week because I'm going to Japan tomorrow. I might be able to post a video up while I'm there, but I'm really not sure what the situation is, so I guess we'll just see. But I'm going to be doing some filming, and if anybody wants to meet up in Tokyo, hit me up on Twitter. Link in the description to my Twitter. And yeah, I'm going to be seeing a bunch of shows, and if I don't have videos while I'm there, I'll have videos once I'm back. All right, I'll see you guys. Peace.